Good morning, students. I hope you all are doing well. Let us continue with our first chapter of translation. And yesterday we discussed that translation is a term which has been coined by James S. Holmes. And after that, we discussed the advantages and disadvantages of translation, right? We also touched upon I just told you the names and read the examples that are given here, that what is translation all about, right? And what are the various categories of translation if we talk about the larger part. Okay, basically there are two categories, that is literary translation and non-literary translation. These are the broader divisions, right? Now literary translation, in our world this type of translation has become very popular. Literal translations बहुत ज़्यादा आ गई हैं, but then there is a problem with them. What is the problem? That they have certain limitations and sometimes even the meaning seems to be lost. This type of translation has become very popular. Many individuals and institutions in various parts of the world are engaged in translating classics in regional languages into English and vice versa. Okay? For instance, in India, many good translators are engaged in translating classics in Hindi to English and of English into Hindi. Similarly, many good works in regional languages have been translated into English. In certain cases, a translated work is retranslated, and when it is retranslated, what will happen? Obviously there will be a loss of meaning. Chinese whisper, पता है आपको Chinese whisper क्या होती है? I will whisper something to one person and then he will whisper something else in the ear of the second person, और by the time वो 10th person के पास पहुंचेगा वो कुछ और ही होगा, है ना? तो उसको Chinese whisper कहते हैं कि at the end you do not know what the real word was put in the ear of the second person. Okay, similarly the thing applies to translation also. For instance, a Kannada novel translated into English is retranslated into Punjabi from English. Needless to say, this kind of translation is far removed from the original and is bound to be deficient in many ways. So literal translation deficient nahi hai. What is deficient is retranslation will definitely be less impressive translated work. Usse kya hoga, he says, it will be removed from the original, retranslated work. Clear? Now, in literary translation, the translator is concerned with sense as well as style. He has to convey the exact meaning or sense apart from retaining the feel of the original text, which is quite a daunting task, a difficult task. The translator of a literary text must be able to decode the motive of the original text. मोटिव क्या आया? वही कॉन्टेक्स्ट, वही भाव जो मैंने आपको शुरू में समझाया कि जो मीनिंग है, जो कॉन्टेक्स्ट है, इट इज़ वेरी वेरी इम्पॉर्टेंट टू बी मेंटेन्ड एंड री एनकोड इट इन द ट्रांसलेटेड टेक्स्ट. तो यहाँ डिकोडिंग एंड री इनकोडिंग की बात हो रही है. दैट इज व्हाट ही इज टॉकिंग अबाउट व्हेन वी आर डूइंग ट्रांसलेशन, व्हेन वी आर डूइंग literal translation. So what we have to do, we have to decode the motive कि क्यों लिखी गई है original text, what the writer is trying to convey to us, and then re-encoding using those same codes and re-encoding them in the new translated text, which is your TL, right? Source language जो हमको translate करनी है, और जिसमें translate करनी है वो क्या होता है? That is our TL, translated text or translated language. It is thus nothing less than a transplantation of experience from one linguistic field to another. So it is more or less a recreation of the original text. In making it authentic, the translator should be able to discover or create what is the task for the translator to do. He has to create similar situations. He has to create similar linguistic modes and experiences. He has to create similar images, and he has to create similar rhythm. In many cases, this similarity has to be invented, for no two cultures could have exact similarities. This I told you already. Cultural differences have to be kept in mind when we are doing translation. So, it is not always easy to find equivalences, especially in the domain of poetry. Now, G.E. Wellworth says that in a literary translation, what is required is the recreation of a situation or cohesive block in the new language in terms of cultural setting of that language. So when you are finally creating the literary text, what is important? You have to use in the new language, it should be in the terms of a cultural setting of that language, has to be kept in mind, right? And if the translator is himself the creator, this process of recreation becomes relatively easy. How? He's giving an example. Though it involves a lot of thinking and hard work. Rabindranath Tagore wrote his Gitanjali in Bengali, and he himself translated it into English. One is stuck with the quality of such translation in terms of original feel, felicity of expression, naturalness, and ease of rhythm. So a very good example they are giving you, that Rabindranath Tagore, he himself translated his Bengali text Gitanjali into English. So for him it was kind of little convenient, but then he still says that the quality of translation in terms of original feel and expression, there can be little changes that can be seen. Okay, अब यहाँ पे आपको स्टॉपिंग बाय द वुड्स का एक एग्जाम्पल दिया है. आई वुड नॉट लाइक टू एंटर इनटू इट मच. According to me, it is not that relevant, right? Now next, page number 16, non-literary translation. Non-literary translation. The non-literary translation is relatively easier than the literary one. It pertains to following disciplines: physical science, social science, journalism, and law. In this type of translation, we are concerned more with meaning than with form. Meaning बहुत important है किसमें? Non-literary translations में. So the translator focuses on the ways of adequate transference of meaning. When there is no equivalent idiomatic phrase word is found in the TL, the role of the translator is that of the interpreter. तो ज़्यादातर chances ये होते हैं कि non-literary translation में जो translator है, he is more of an interpreter than a translator. He conveys the sense in using plain words or an idiomatic phrase word in the TL which comes close to the one in the SL, that is your source language. That is why it is said that three things often take place in process of translation. And what are those three things? Loss of meaning हो जाता है, addition of meaning होता है, and or skewing of meaning takes place. The meaning is either lost or the meaning is either diminished. So these are the three things which happen in the process of translation. Now here are few typical sentences in the source language which are translated in English in a typical way. For example, तकल्लुफ़ ना करें. अब इंग्लिश में कैसे ट्रांसलेट करोगे? करो ज़रा, तकल्लुफ़ ना करें. Do not stand on ceremony. तो literal translation नहीं possible होती है. Literal translation means word to word translation हम नहीं कर सकते हैं कई चीज़ों का. मैंने भी आपको एक example दिया था. सिक्का घिसते घिसते घिस गया. right? But then what does that mean? It simply means that it withered with the passage of time. The coin withered with the passage of time. वह खून के घूंट पी कर रह गया. He pocketed the insult. खाना परोस दो, lay the table. अब what will you say? Put the food? No, you can't say put the food. You will say lay the table. मेरा भाग्य जाग पड़ा. So my fortune has awakened? No. Fortune smiled at me. ठीक है? मेरा सिर चकरा रहा है. My head is going round and round? No. So I am feeling giddy. So these remain some examples, typical sentences in SL which are translated into English in a typical way. SL हमारी source language हिंदी है यहाँ पे और target language is English. Now apart, these sentences clearly point out limitations in translating one register in terms of local idiom into another. So basically what they are trying to say, that word to word translation is something which is not possible. It has its own limitations. There are cultural differences. There are differences related to the linguistics of the language, related to grammar of the language, related to geographical domain of that particular area to which the translator belongs. So many factors, he says, which give us or point out the limitations of translation. Apart from these two translations which are based on Yoners, there are some types named each after its nature and function. Now the first is, पहले हमने पढ़ी literary translation, है ना? Literary works translate कर रहे हो literature के, right? Then non-literary की बात करी हमने, and now on the basis of their nature and function, the first category is literal. And literal क्या होता है? Word to word translation. It is basically word to word, word for word translation. Needless to say, it is quite deficient. बहुत सारी कमियां हैं, deficient. Most of the beginners adopt this way of translation. It often fails in cross-cultural situations. There are many expressions in each language which defy word for word translation. When these expressions are translated literally, they seem absurd. As for instance, ये हमने कल पढ़े थे, गाड़ी में बिल्कुल स्थान नहीं है. There is no place in the car? No. You will say there is no room in the train. The examples we have touched upon yesterday, right? Now this first was literal translation. Second is transcreation. When a concept is taken and recreated in another language, it is transcreation. You are creating something once again. And what something concept को recreate कर रहे हो, ठीक है? This kind of translation is not restricted to literature. It is used even in non-literary texts such as commercial ads to cater to the needs of the international customers. In case of poetry, the only way to convey an alien experience in the SL into the TL is by recreating it by modifying necessary words or phrases, keeping in mind not to go very far from the original. The aim of the transcreator is to make sure that the feel of the original language remains intact in the TL. तो जो transcreator है ना, वो क्या बात ध्यान में रखता है? He makes sure that the feel, the context, the bhav, that remains same which was there in the original language, that is in the SL, that is in the source text. So this is transcreation. Clear? Third category, total और partial translation. जैसे कि नाम ही बता रहा है, either total translation or partial translation. Transcreation में हमने क्या किया? We are creating another translation using the context. वो हो गया आपका transcreation. Now, translation has been classified in terms of extent, level, and rank. In a total or full translation, every part of the original text is translated. Each and every part of the text is translated. Whereas in partial translation, some of the parts are left untranslated for either of the two reasons. मतलब कुछ हिस्सा वो ट्रांसलेट करेंगे and some part they will leave untranslated. तो वो क्या होगी? Partial translation. And what are those two reasons जिसकी वजह से वो untranslated रहे? The parts are untranslatable, one. And second, there is need to provide local color to the TL text. Word for word translation is a rank bound translation which is often considered bad translation. So, such kind of translation which is word for word, it is not possible. So basically क्या बात कर रहे हैं वो यहाँ पे कौन सी category of translation हमें दे रहा है? Word total translation or partial translation, right? And the last type is machine or automate translation, जो softwares को use करके हम translation करते हैं, that is machine translation or automate translation. Through specially designed softwares, there is an inbuilt mechanism in laptops and on cell phones which help us in translation. CAT, Computer Aided Translation, CAT tools have become very popular in translating the SL into TL text. Facebook and Google are providing tools to facilitate dialogue in various languages across the globe. We have seen this for ourselves. So basically आप क्या ध्यान रखेंगे? Automate or machine translation is the use of software for the purpose of translation. ठीक है? तो broadly speaking हमने two categories देखी, that is literary translation and non-literary translation. And then this was followed by what we called literal translation. पहली वाली क्या थी? Literary and non-literary. ठीक है? And that was broadly speaking two distinctions, two types of translation. And then on the basis of name and function, there are four translations, that is literal translation, transcreation, total or partial translation, and lastly you have what? You have automate or machine translation. अब I hope आपको इन सारी categories का जो मीनिंग है वो समझ आया होगा. लिटरल होगी वर्ड फॉर वर्ड ट्रांसलेशन, एंड वर्ड फॉर वर्ड ट्रांसलेशन को पहले ही द राइटर इज सेइंग कि इट इज़ नॉट अ गुड ट्रांसलेशन बिकॉज वर्ड फॉर वर्ड ट्रांसलेशन इज not possible. Second, he says transcreation when the translator who is translating a work, who is translating the SL text, right, into TL text, he is only using the context but making his own text, that is transcreated text. He is creating his own text but he is using the context of the SL text. वो हो गया आपका transcreation. ठीक है? Then total translation, जब आप complete translation कर रहे हो किसी वर्क की, and partial translation when you are leaving out some portion of the SL text and you are not translating into TL. उसके दो reasons हैं. He says कि word for word translation possible नहीं है and कुछ ऐसा part है SL text का which can not be translated at all. ठीक है? And last है automate or machine translation, in which you are using softwares for the purpose of translation. So very easy categorizations. I have repeated it twice ताकि आप लोगों को अच्छे से समझ आ जाए and you have no doubts about it, right? After that, let us take another topic today, that is translator and his functions. What are the functions, what are the duties, what are the important tasks which a translator has to do? Translator and his functions. A translator is still viewed with suspicion and disrespect especially by creative writers. Why? They suspect them that they wonder that if this translator will be able to do justice to my work. That is why, they see them with suspicion, they see them with disrespect. Though his work is in no way inferior or less challenging than the creative one. In India, he has an important role to play, and that is of unifying minds of people belonging to different cultural backgrounds living in various parts of the country. Not only that, he is to help the best authors in our native languages to have their presence on the international map. So he's doing a very challenging job. He is making the writers, of our country, of the native authors, he is making them known at the international level, on the international map. He is at par with the creative writer in the SL in what he does in the TL, in the target language text. Among his important functions are making a right choice of the medium and the target text, giving priority to quality over material considerations. So quality is his priority. Okay? Recognizing limitations in his task and working accordingly. Ensuring his mastery over the SL and the TL. Familiarizing with the locale, that is the setting, and social cultural milieu of the work in the SL. Acquiring adequate knowledge of the TL with a different culture. Interacting freely with others to discover equivalent words needed in the TL. Avoiding word for word approach, which is not a good translation, word for word translation. Making a rational balance between close fidelity to the original and complete freedom from it. Deciding rationally to retain untranslatable part of the original in the target language so that the feel of the original is not lost. तो जो translator है उसका एक important task ये भी रहता है कि things which are untranslatable, what he has to do in that case, he has to maintain the feeling of the original text. That is the SL. He can't do away completely without, he can just not completely ignore the untranslatable part of the SL. Clear? So these are his important functions. These are important functions which a translator is doing. And the most important thing जो आपको याद रखनी है, that the job of the translator is as challenging as the job of the author who has written the text, the SL text. जिसने ओरिजिनल वर्क लिखा है, जितना क्रिएटिव वर्क उसने किया है, उतना ही क्रिएटिव एंड चैलेंजिंग वर्क ट्रांसलेटर को भी करना पड़ता है. That is the main aspect, that is his main function, right? Here is a model of translation process for the guidance of a translator, which is similar to the transformation of a dramatic text to a performance text by George Stammer's words are quite important for a translator to remember in this model. तो अगर आप ये model आप देखें इसको आपको समझ आ जाएगा. If you want to take it as an example, you may, but you generally get a question that what are the functions of a good translator. So the portion with which I started, that much is good enough for you to write a good answer, and also for your understanding as to what are the basic functions as far as a translator is concerned. Okay, so this is all, and now we are left with only two topics, that is importance of translation and translation in various domains like literature, like commerce, and many more. This we will continue. So for the time being, now you have two notes to be prepared. And what are those? Categories of translation, number one, and number two, what are the functions of a good translator? Okay, do that please. साइड बाय साइड नोट्स बनाते रहिए, आपके लिए अच्छा रहेगा. एकदम से कुछ नहीं होगा. बाय लर्निंग, रोट जिसको कहते हैं ना, रटा नहीं मारा जाएगा. Towards the end, you will have to make the notes side by side. Okay? कोई डाउट आता है, कोई चीज़ नहीं समझ आती है किसमें कितना लिखना है, अभी आप वो चीज़ में जाओ भी मत कि किसमें कितना लिखना है. ठीक है? The thing is, on the basis of the lecture that I'm giving you and on the basis of what is there in the book, आप अपने notes side by side बनाते जाइए. Make a note that what are the types of translation. Next note today that you have to make is who is the translator and what are his main functions. आपको ये question इस तरह से भी आ सकता है, write the main functions of a good translation, or what are the main functions of a good translator. Okay, so these are the two topics that I covered today. Two topics are left from the first unit. Clear? Start working please. मैं time and again आप लोगों को बोल रही हूँ, start making your notes. Okay, that is all. In case of any queries, you are most welcome. Thank you so much. Take care.